Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a set of mini reviews. I've found that I currently don't really have the time to record a dedicated review for every single book that I read, so I figured a good solution would be to sit down and record my thoughts about a book and do a review right when I finish it, and then combine that with the same thing for other books. So you will find that throughout this video, when I talk about different books, I am probably gonna have filmed those on different days, wearing different clothes in different locations, that sort of thing. I'll have timestamps down below, so if there's a specific book that you want to see the review for, you can just skip on to that. But the first one that I'm going to be talking about would be The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. This story follows a young girl named Jo. She is Chinese and she's growing up in Atlanta, Georgia of the United States at a time when a lot of minorities were treated very poorly, and on top of that, a lot of women didn't have a lot of rights. The dynamics that are explored throughout the story are amazing. You see Jo interacting with the person who raised her, who is Chinese, trying to keep her Chinese culture alive for her, but at the same time, she ends up having to work for a lot of individuals who are white, and she works alongside a lot of other minorities, and certain minorities are treated much worse than her, but then she's not necessarily treated the way white people are treated, and it's just a very interesting situation going on. Jo has these beautiful dreams of becoming a hat maker. Currently, she is working for someone, but because of the fact that she's Chinese, just her very presence makes some people uncomfortable, so she ends up at the beginning of the story being let go, and as a result has to take a job she really doesn't want because she has no other choice. She needs the money, and so she doesn't really have a lot of freedom to explore the things that she wants to explore, and she has a very bizarre opportunity to write under a pseudonym through their newspaper, and this ends up causing so much of a stir in her area because she's essentially writing for other women, like an advice column, but nobody knows it's her, and a lot of women are getting kind of riled up, and they really have a lot of controversy with the things that she's saying because the things she's saying are maybe more progressive for that time period. Doing this, though, is extremely dangerous because impersonating an individual who is white, which she's not doing actively, it's just assumed person writing this would be white because she probably wouldn't be allowed to publish any of her own words. So to do this, she's put in a lot of danger because you can be punished for such a thing. And so she's having the ability to vocalize her thoughts and try to advocate for change, but at the same time, she's in a lot of danger by doing this. All in all, I ended up very much enjoying this story. I think it explores so many things, and one particular thing I found really fascinating was that Jo is growing up in America. That's all she's ever really known, but strangely, this individual who has raised her has tried to keep Chinese culture alive in her and make her appreciate it, but strangely, you see her almost rejecting traditional Chinese values while also trying to change the things that are going on in America. And so it's fascinating that even though she sees that America is so messed up, she also doesn't really want to necessarily embrace everything about her own heritage. It's very interesting, very nuanced, and I just really enjoyed it. I think that it tackles so many difficult topics, and it explores the intricacies of relationships during this time while also having a lot of hope. I think a lot of stories that are about these more difficult sorts of things can be very tragic, they can be very heavy, and I think this book, it was very witty. Jo is the only perspective, and she's very charming, and I found that sometimes you get bits and pieces of her advice column, and a lot of them are very funny and very clever, but I just feel like it was hopeful. It was positive. There was difficult things discussed, but it was discussed in a way where you could, I don't know, it was like almost warm fuzzies, and I just found that if you're somebody who is a very sensitive person, maybe you're reading heavier topics and it just is weighing on you a lot, this is one that I think, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of books, I just want to clear that up, but this one, it's about something heavy, but through the voice and the eyes of somebody who is just so charming and delightful. Next up, we have The Shadows Between Us. This is a story that follows a girl named Alessandra who has her sights set on marrying the Shadow King. Her goal is to seduce this person, have them marry her, and then kill them so she can take all of their power. When I heard the premise for this book, I was really excited because I thought it sounded hilarious, and I was hoping that it wouldn't take itself too seriously, that our main character wasn't going to be some like she's just misunderstood kind of thing going on, and it wasn't. It was exactly what I was hoping. It was a girl who is ruthless and she's terrible, and she's exactly what I was hoping she would be, and she's constantly going around and manipulating people and screwing things up for people, and she's a true schemer. And it was super entertaining. I think if you are looking for a good, almost like court politics type story, but the way it's described I've seen is as a Slytherin romance. If you're the kind of person where any of those things sound good to you, I think you would really like this. I, throughout the story, really enjoyed seeing that this character, it's not like there's some redemption arc where you kind of root for her because she's the main character and it's like you're just like along for her crazy ride. But I wouldn't say you're like, I hope she in the end just like realizes that she's done wrong. It's not that kind of a story. It's a ridiculously good time. Throughout the book, I think her character, the author did a really good job of bringing her to life and truly making her seem really wicked. Because of the nature of the story and the setup being this character that's going to seduce someone and she relies on her feminine wiles to get what she wants pretty often, you're definitely going to see some mature themes. I wouldn't say there was ever any scenes in this book that were extremely explicit or anything like that. There's not tons of details, but it is touching on some things that maybe it would be helpful for you to know. Overall, if you are looking for a fun, well-crafted story that is filled with kind of like a villainous character and other villainous characters with tons of backstabbing and screwing people over, but it's highly crazy entertaining, that's exactly what you're getting with this. If that's what you're looking for, if you just want to break from some of the more dense stuff, maybe you've been reading classics, maybe you've been reading really big monsters of fantasy that have tons of world building. If you're looking for just a fun, juicy story that is ridiculous but a good time, that's pretty much exactly what this is. Next up, we have Scavenge the Stars. This is a Count of Monte Cristo retelling. I have not read the original. I did look into it. I had some knowledge of the story before, but I looked into it after reading this one, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a story that you're going to fall in love with if you love the original. Retellings are always really tricky, in my opinion. I know I read another book last year called The Bird and the Blade, which was a retelling, and I loved that book until the very end. And the end of the book is the end of the original story, but I would have preferred, in that instance, for the author to have changed it, because I felt like it ended up feeling forced. It didn't feel like that's really what the ending of that story was supposed to be, even though it was the end of the original. And so sometimes I find with retellings, if you try to force certain things to be the same, sometimes it's not really enhancing the story. And that's what I felt like was true of this one. There were certain elements when it came to some reveals and certain things about the story, the pacing and whatnot, where I liked it initially, but then when we got to the end and there were some twists, the twists were cool and I really liked them, but I felt like they did not hit the way they could have. There were some elements about the twist at the end that, while I found them really interesting, I also did not have any emotional connection. I was kind of like, I didn't see that coming. That sucks. But I wasn't like, no way, no, which is what I want with a twist. There's some elements of the characterization as well, some that I loved and some that I didn't love. So the setup is our main character, Amaya. She has been a slave on this ship for 7 years, and once the 7 years are up, then she can have her freedom. Some things go wrong right before she's supposed to get her freedom, and now her life is almost ruined, but she meets this person who might help her go along this path where she can get revenge for all the wrongs that were done to her. And that element, of course, that's probably where a lot of it, you can already tell if you're familiar with the original, that's where the similarities are. However, it's dual perspective. So our other character, Ko, is the son of a wealthy individual who Amaya is kind of trying to take down as part of her revenge plot. And Ko is kind of caught in all of this without actually being a bad guy. These two people interact and they're kind of not aware that the other is trying to play the other person. And so those elements, I liked those elements. I liked these two who were secretly trying to get at one another and use one another, but then they also were like, this person seems like a good guy. However, I thought that Amaya's character was really well done. It took a lot for us to feel like we could actually get to know her because she was so damaged, and for so long she was just nothing. She couldn't really have a personality. She just had to shut down and work hard so that her sentence wasn't extended. But as a result, it took a long time to get to know her. Then when you did get to know her, you're like, oh, I want you to be happy, and I want you to move on from all of this. And I really liked her character growth. But with Ko, I felt like Ko was constantly described as being kind of a smooth talker, of being kind of flirty, but then every time he would talk to somebody, he would get tongue-tied and he never knew what to say, and he was always really like, oh, I screwed everything up. Oh, I'm a screw-up. And I'm like, it didn't really align with what the narrative was telling me. Also, I felt like Amaya's path for revenge, it wasn't really that personal. So she has the direct person who is kind of the person who owns her in a way on the ship. So I understood her wanting revenge on that person, but it's revealed to her, oh, there are other people way up at the top that are the reason that all of this is like this. She doesn't really know these people, but she's like, oh, well, I guess they are part of the problem, so I have to get them too. And that makes it so that the revenge doesn't feel tangible the way that you want revenge stories to feel. It just feels kind of distant. It makes the antagonist not really feel that threatening. You don't feel like there's not a huge connection even for the main character, so then it's hard for the reader to have that big of a connection. However, I did find there was a couple of passages throughout the story that I absolutely loved. One particular section that I thought was really, really good was Amaya reflecting on this whole process of trying to get revenge and what it's doing to her and whether it's worth it. I really enjoyed all of that. I also enjoyed our main character, the second one, Ko. He struggles with addiction, and there's a passage, pretty much a whole chapter, where he's trying really hard not to fall back into some of his old habits and his old ways, and that chapter I thought was really, really well done. So there were elements to this that I loved, and I really thought that those parts were quite powerful, but there were some other things for me that just made it so that I didn't feel as connected to the story and to the motivations of the characters as maybe I would have liked.